And today we're going to talk about the last line of Dagestan. Where is Dagestan? So that's Dagestan on the western bank of the Caspian Sea. On the opposite side of the Caspian Sea is Kazakhstan. And the Ottomans were beasts of the Caspian Sea, and they spread Islam in those places. And the Muslims themselves, the Sahaba, had gone to Azerbaijan. You all see under there, you see Azerbaijan? The Sahaba had gone there. Through Persia. Syria is right there. And then you have, what is that? That's Iran. You see Persia? Through Persia, they went up to Azerbaijan. So Islam's been there a long time. And the Ottomans were strong in the Caspian Sea. So that's Dagestan. Now, to the left of Dagestan is the hook of Russia. So Russia is mainly on the east, but it hooks down like that so that the Dagestan is western border is Russia. And of course, now we all know that Russia has absorbed Dagestan into its empire now. So that part, Russia has been trying to access Dagestan for a long time. You know why? Obvious reason. They want access to the Caspian Sea. All the trade and all the ships and the ferries, they don't want to have to go through Dagestan for that. You understand now why Dagestan and Russia have always had issues. And today we're going to read about the last lion of Dagestan, who is Imam Shamil. He was born in 26th of June, 1797. 1797, and he died in 1871. He was born with the name Ali. And as he became sick, apparently some kind of local custom, if your son becomes ill when he's young, you change his name. So they changed his name to Shamwil, but the pronunciation became Shamil. And when he got to the Arabic lands, they called him Shamil. His father, Dingao, was a landlord, and his close friend was Ghazi Muhammad, so they were very wealthy. And wealthy kids studied back then. You studied the martial arts, using a sword, riding horses, shooting, etc., and you studied knowledge. From an early age, he studied the Arabic language, so he became fluent in Arabic, and he was a alim. And he studied al-ulum al-aqli, or al-aqliyat, such as mantiq and logic. He grew up at a time when the Russian Empire was expanding into the Ottoman lands and into Iran. And he grew up when he was young, the Russo-Turkish War happened between the Russians and the Ottomans. And this is where the bad blood of the Russians has been now for a while now. Many Caucasian peoples united in resistance with the Ottomans against the Russians and the imperial aspiration of what became known as the Caucasian War. Earlier leaders of the Caucasian resistance included Haji Dawood, Sheikh Mansour, and Ghazi Mullah. Shamil, or Shamil, we're just going to call him Shamil from now on, was a childhood friend of the Mullah, and he would become his disciple and took advice from him. Shamil, he married an Armenian woman who was born in Russia. She was captured in a raid and brought into the Dagestani land and into the tribe. And as a teenager, she entered Islam. And she married Imam Shamil, and she remained loyal to him to the end. After the death of Imam Shamil, she moved to the Ottoman Empire, and the Sultan assigned her a home and a pension, so she never had to worry about any of this. In 1832, Ghazi Mullah, who was basically, like you can say, the Sheikh of Imam Shamil, the one he looked up to, he died in the Battle of Gimri. Shamil was one of only 2 murids of Ghazi Mullah to escape. Imagine your sheikh is the general of an army, right? I mean, how cool is that? During this fight, Imam Shamil was stabbed with a bayonet after having jumped from an elevated building clean over the heads of all the soldiers who were trying to fire on him. And when he landed, he whirled around with his sword and was able to cut 3 of the soldiers, but the 4th one was able to bayonet him. And the bayonet is like a gun, a rifle with a blade. So it operates as both. And that steel went deep into his chest. He seized the bayonet, pulled it out of his own flesh, killed that man, and then cleared another wall, jumped over a wall, and vanished. And he went into hiding. Both the Russians and the Murids all assumed him to be dead. Murids were the name of the Muslim soldiers. Once he recovered, he emerged from his hiding and he rejoined the army of the Murids, led by now the second Imam, Hamza Bey. And he would wage an unremitting warfare on the Russians for the next 25 years until he became their leader, and he changed the strategy. There would be no more head-to-head combat. It would be all guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare is when you come in on the enemy as a small group, you do a quick attack, and you leave. It's not meeting the enemy anymore on a certain plane, on a plane of land. Hamza Bek was killed only 2 years. He led for 2 years only. And that's when Imam Shamil took his place as the prime leader of the Caucasian resistance and the third Imam of the Caucasian Imama. Mullah Ghazi, Hamza Bey, and Imam Shamil. This picture, how do we do it? This right here is Mullah Ghazi. And now we're going to turn to Imam Shamil. In June of 1839, after leading for 5 years now, Shamil and his followers, being 4,000 men, women, and children, were under siege in the mountain stronghold of Akhulgo, nested in the bend of the Andi Koisu, about 10 miles east of Gyumri. Under the command of Pavel Grabe, the Russian army trekked through lands devoid of supplies because of Shamil's scorched earth strategy. In other words, he burned all the path for them to come. They wouldn't have any food or anything. The geography of the stronghold protected it from three sides, adding the difficulty of conducting the siege. So there's very difficult siege. Eventually, the two sides agreed to negotiate. Complying with Grabe's demands, Shamil gave his son, Jamal ad-Din, in a sign of good faith, as a hostage. Shamil rejected Grabe's proposal that Shamil command his forces to surrender for him and to accept exile from the region. He said, no, that's off the table. The Russian army, therefore, attacked the stronghold after 2 days of fighting. The Russian troops had secured the stronghold. Shamil escaped the siege on the first night of attack. His forces had been broken, and many Dagestani and Chechen chieftains proclaimed loyalty to the Tsar. Many tribal leaders gave up, and they said, all right, white flag is up. We're Russians now. We're loyal to the Tsar. We're with Russia. Shamil then left Dagestan after his whole army is obliterated, and he went to Chechnya. There, he made quick work of extending his influence over the clans, and he gathered another group. Shamil was effective at uniting the many quarrelsome tribes of the Caucasus to fight against the Russians. And by force of his charisma, his known piety, his fairness, and his knowledge of the Sharia, they gathered around him in Ashishan.
This is Chechnya.
And that's Dagestan. So he went west, basically. See, the reason you can't see any of this stuff on the map anymore, because they just put Russia all the way to the Caspian Sea. That's why you can't see it on the map anymore. So Imam Shamil then gathers a new army of the tribes in Ashishan. And one Russian source commented on him as a man of great tact and a subtle politician. He believed the Russian introduction of alcohol in the area corrupted the traditional values. Against the large, regular Russian military, Shamil made effective use of irregular and guerrilla tactics. And that's where, as I said earlier, he shifted now to guerrilla warfare. Before that, in Dagestan, he had a land. He had an imama. He was sultan. It was at the Caucasian imamate. Now that he's in Chechnya, he's using guerrilla warfare against them. Against the large Russian military, he used guerrilla tactics. In 1845, he's been leading for 11 years now. He's been the imam there for 11 years now. An 8,000 to 10,000 strong column under the Russian Count Mikhail Vorontsov followed the imam's forces into the forests of Chechnya. The imamate's forces surrounded the Russian column. Shamil and his forces surrounded them and cut them all down. He destroyed this column of Russian forces. This destroyed Vorontsov's attempt to cut away Chechnya from the imamate, which was his plan. Imam Shamil was active that year, and his forces destroyed this Russian contingent. Imam Shamil now, his fortunes got better. He joined forces with Haji Murad, who defected from the Russians in 1841 and tripled by his fighting the area under Shamil's control within a short time.